If you really wanted to. God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. I don't know how many of you guys have brothers and sisters. I have one. Anyone have brothers and sisters?
3 brothers.
Oh, 7.
7 brothers
How would-
and 5 girls.
Wow.
That's a lot of work. How would you feel if your brothers and sisters literally beat you up, locked you in the basement or locked you in some place, and then sold you? And this happens still today, by the way.
Yes.
People sell kids, people sell, kids disappear and they're sold and stuff like that. So this is possible. But how would you feel if that happened to you?
Resentful against the brothers.
I don't think you'd be very happy. And how would you feel if you were given to some black market dealer guy, and he sells you to work for some guy in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates or something like that, to be a slave, literally? How would you feel?
Sad.
Feel sad. Hateful.
Abandoned by God.
If you were a slave to this, whoever it was, some rich guy in the middle of some place in the desert. We'll use Egypt because it's a similar place. What kind of a servant would you be? With all that hate, with all that anger.
Very bad.
Very nice.
Would you be like the best servant you could be?
No.
No. Would you be trying your hardest to please your master?
Poison.
To save
You
your
should
skin,
come up
yes.
water.
You have to do your best to save your skin.
And let's say you got arrested for something you didn't do. And we're talking about rape. We're not talking about stealing bread. We're talking about, some lady who tried to rape you, pretty much, accuses you of raping her, and you're sent to jail for the rest of your life. How would you feel about that woman? Or man, I guess, depending on. How would you feel in jail?
Not happy.
And how would you act in jail? Would you be the best prisoner you could be?
No. Especially if you were a woman. You would just for sure be raped.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
See, and these are the questions that make Joseph different. This is why Joseph, you can say, was rich through every stage that he went through. In fact, who does he blame
Himself.
for his life and what went through his life?
Himself.
Who's responsible?
God.
God.
The best.
Right? Because who does it say? It was not you who sent me here. It wasn't you who threw me in that pit, who sold me into slavery, who got me arrested, who got all... It wasn't you that really did all that. You might have been used. But the person behind it all was God. Now, if you believe that it was actually God who threw you into that pit, who got you sold into slavery, who got you arrested for a crime you didn't do, if you blame God for all those bad things in your life, would you like God or would you hate God?
Hate.
But he knew that was a plan at the end of all this.
Yeah, there's a difference there, right?
Joseph knew. That's why he never became resentful or hating God.
But every time, and this includes me, when something really bad happens in your life, especially when it's a shock, his name comes up sooner or later in your head. Because at the end of the day, we all know that he's in charge. Yes, this is Satan's world. Yes, he's always doing evil stuff. but this is the person that allows it. And Joseph realized that. Joseph's not lying here. He's telling the truth. And it's at that moment that two possible lives occur. It's at that moment when something horrible happens in your life, and sooner or later, he comes into your head. And you realize this is all God's fault. That you have to make a choice. And you either say, "You've ruined my life. You separated from my family. You turned me into a slave. You got me arrested. And I did nothing to deserve it." In fact, that's the majority, I would say, of how people respond. And once you make that decision, once you make a decision that you don't deserve what you're going through, and that it's all God's fault, and that He's punishing you unfairly, that's when you start reacting. When you're a slave and someone tells you to do something, that's when you say no. You throw the towel down or whatever it is. Or when you're in jail and they tell you to do something, you say no. Right? It's at this moment in your life that you make that choice. And if your choice is to hate God and what He's done in your life will be very different from Joseph. In fact, your life will be those people you see around you all the time. Because I know everybody in this room knows somebody that made the opposite of Joseph, who just gave up on everything because none of it's fair. And because everything you're going through you don't deserve. You don't have to guess what that choice looks like. You just have to look around. And you can see exactly what that life is like. And then there's this choice. It's what makes Joseph so different. It's what makes him different from his brothers. Joseph, each step of the way, and think about it, his life just got worse and worse. I mean, he just got from one bad thing to another. It's bad enough that your brothers try to kill you in a well. And then they sell you. And then they take you to a whole other country. And then you get arrested for something you don't do. His life, if you were to think of it in the other way, his life was just getting worse and worse and worse. And yet when we look at his story, we're conflicted, aren't we? With such an easy question. Is he rich or is he poor? That should be black and white. That should be a very easy question to answer. And yet with Joseph, it's hard. Because even though his life seems to be getting worse and worse, at the same time, and this is completely unexplainable, at the same time that his life is getting worse and worse, his life is also getting better and better. Because in Joseph's life, that moment came where he looked at what was happening to him and he realized, I did nothing wrong. And he realized that, yes, my brothers might have done it, but he's the one that allowed it. God, at the end of the day, is the one that really did this to me. But instead of saying, why is God cursing me? Why does God hate me? Joseph had, and this is the remarkable part, but somehow he had faith that even in the bad things, God had a plan.
Amen.
That this bad thing that was happening to him only seemed bad. But there was actually something good behind it. He just couldn't see it yet. Because let's face it, if you're sold into slavery, do you really have positive ideas of your future? No.
Not at all.
And yet when he was sold into slavery, did his physical lifestyle improve or get worse? Improved somehow. He went from living in tents in the desert to living in a palace. And the jail was the same way. Ultimately, not just a palace, but the palace. Now, it's a huge step of faith. It is. Because everything in your head is telling you that what's going on is 100% bad. But God sees the universe very differently. And really, this answers the ultimate question in the universe. The one we always ask over and over again. Atheists love asking this one. If God is so good, and if God knows the future, and if God knows everything that's going to happen, why in the world did he let Satan exist? Because when it comes to Satan, we're in the exact same boat. We didn't choose to be born here. We didn't choose to be born in sin or in a sinful world. But it happened. And at the end of the day, who is the person that's actually responsible for you being born on this earth? Your parents were there. Just like the brothers were there. But at the end of the day, God is the one that puts you here. And so in the great scheme of things, the same question has to come up. Why am I here? Why is Satan here? Why are you allowing sin to continue? Why are you allowing death and pain and all these horrible things that happen to us? Why? Because when we look at Satan, we see 100% bad. But that's not what God sees. See, we're living through it. We're suffering through it. So it's very easy to focus on the negatives and only see negative. To look at Satan and say there is nothing positive about this situation. But God sees it differently. Because once this story, this earth story is over, with Satan and sin and the earth and everything else, people were perfect before. Before Satan appeared in the picture, there was perfection. And everyone loved God, and God loved everybody.
Amen.
But somehow, and again, this is where it defies our understanding, after Satan is gone, and sin, and all these things, even though they were already perfect, even though they already loved God, after Satan, they will love God more. And they will be closer to God than they were before sin. And the Bible is clear, and I'll explain in a second, that the people who will be closest to God, most loving to God, will be who?